impact, the bullet flattens out. Bone shatters and splinters, causing further damage to muscle and tissue. More often than not, the result of a direct hit, death. But for all the Mini-Ball's technological edge, the Army still uses traditional military tactics.
What made it particularly tragic was modern technology meeting much more ancient tactics. So the death rates were truly appalling.
The troops still face one another openly in lines across the battlefield. But the Mini-Ball is accurate over a range of 600 yards, easily spanning this distance. And it can be reloaded 8 times faster than a traditional weapon. The effects are catastrophic. The kill rate increases dramatically compared to previous wars. Cotton.
The North had to be the occupying force, which is far harder to do.
Lee's men kill over 17
troops besides our regiment.
Lincoln realizes it can revolutionize the speed of troop deployments. He strikes a deal with the rail owners to put the North's railroad network under government control. It turns the railroad into a weapon of war.
Instead of armies being limited to the speed at which they could march, all of a sudden you had armies be able to move to the front by rail, and more importantly, supplies.
Supplies and troops pour out of the North towards the battlefront. Some busy lines carry 800 tons of supplies a day, the equivalent of 80 railroad cars. In Lincoln's hands, the 24,000 miles of rail track in the North becomes an arm of his war machine. But the South has a far smaller network, just 9,000 miles at the start of the war, and it remains under private control. In the 4 years the war lasts, the North adds 4,000 miles of new track to its network, against just 400 miles in the South. This inability to coordinate rail supplies will prove disastrous for the South. Even though they're just 30 miles from their capital in Richmond, in the winter of 1863, poor rail links means Southern troops in Virginia starve. And at its heart, a simple device that will transform how this war is fought and won: the telegraph. The invention of Morse code in 1844 turns the telegraph into America's first tool of mass communication. Quickly encoded, the basic system of dots and dashes is ideal for brief messages. Like Twitter today, it needs just seconds to send them and transcribe them. Where messengers previously took days, on horseback, over hundreds of miles, and across every kind of terrain. Now, the country's 50,000-mile telegraph network means communication is almost instantaneous. As telegraph poles snake out alongside the railroad lines, this vast country begins to shrink. It will transform the nature of this war, as information and decisions can flow backwards and forwards at lightning speed. From the front. Over 4 times as many as during World War II.
Before yesterday, I performed 14 amputations without leaving the table. I do not exaggerate when I say I have performed, at the least calculation, 50 amputations. There are so many severely wounded through the joints. There are so many operations yet to be performed.
Surgeon Theodore Diamond describes the hideous wounds left by weapons like the mini-ball.
The shattering, splintering, and splitting of a long bone by the impact of the mini-ball is both remarkable and frightening.
An experienced surgeon can hack off a limb in just 10 minutes. Ether and chloroform are used as anesthetics. If a bullet doesn't kill you, then infection can. Gangrene is the greatest killer. Deprived of oxygen, wounds become an ideal breeding ground for Clostridium, a bacteria that releases a poisonous toxin, destroying tissue. Death can follow quickly. Approximately 60,000 amputations are performed during the Civil War, more than in any other war America has fought in. Twice as many soldiers die from infected wounds and disease as on the battlefield. This unprecedented carnage forces a complete rethink of traditional battlefield medicine. Looking after the well-being of soldiers becomes as central to the war effort as the supply of guns and ammunition. Large numbers of women sign up as battlefield nurses. One of them is Clara Barton. Clara Barton is untrained and unpaid. When she starts, most nurses are men. It is a menial occupation. The remedies she proposes for the care of the wounded are simple, but revolutionary in their effect.
They want food, clothing, shelter, medicines, and a few calm, practical persons to administer them.
She insists the injured have a ready supply of clean bandages. First aid, the sorting of the wounded to put the most serious cases first. The Civil War brings in a series of innovations that form the basis of battlefield medicine to this day. 20,000 women sign on as nurses during the war. Clara Barton herself goes on to found the American Red Cross. Standards of hygiene begin to dramatically improve with the discovery of bromine. This caustic chemical is effective against the bacteria that cause gangrene. As a result, nearly 3/4 of amputees survive surgery. Gangrene becomes rare by the war's end. Sense.
There was war photography coming.
Just were placid, as if he was sleeping.
That's because of the new technique known as embalming. Chemicals like arsenic and zinc chloride are injected into the corpse to halt the natural process of decay. The business of death, the preservation of bodies, turns undertakers into overnight millionaires. Ultimatum.
So be.
The Emancipation Proclamation changes the dynamics of the war. The Union Army becomes a force for liberation, now fighting to end slavery.
They understood that saving the Union would give them some sense of freedom, some sense of dignity. It was the dignity that I'm a soldier. I'm not just a servant. I'm a soldier. I have a uniform. I have stripes. I'm somebody.
Lincoln follows the proclamation with his masterstroke. His address in 1863, dedicating America's first national cemetery for soldiers at Gettysburg, is perhaps the single most famous piece of political rhetoric in history.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth.
So again, there were some of the advantages that the North had. Again, railroads, more people, more supplies, more ships, more food, and they had the telegraph, of course, to get information out to the battle lines. And they had Abraham Lincoln, who was a great strategist as well. So if you look at this this chart here, you'll see that reasons for fighting. Okay, in the beginning, the North was to preserve the Union, to bring the Union or the United States back together. Later, it'll be to end slavery. For the South, it was, states' rights. You can't tell us what to do all the time, North. That's what they're trying to say. And you can't take our slavery away from us because that's our economy. That's our livelihood. Again, the Northern strategy was the Anaconda Plan to surround the South and cut them off, take the Mississippi River. And the South was just to fight a defensive war, let the North come to them. Again, for leaders, the North had Abraham Lincoln, and they had Ulysses S. Grant. For the South, Jefferson Davis was president, and Robert E. Lee was their greatest commander. We talked about the draft. The draft, again, was unpopular in 1863. You could pay your way out of the draft if you had money, $300 in the North could find you a substitute, $500 in the South. There were draft riots, as you can see in New York City. There were many draft riots where they took it out on very wealthy people. They went around, and beat wealthy people up. They also beat African Americans up and killed people too, saying, "This is your fault. This is your war. Why we're getting drafted? I'm going to die." So they took it out on the wealthy and minorities, blaming it on them. To keep the peace, Lincoln had to suspend habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is something that you want. It's your civil liberties. It's if you are arrested, they have to tell you why they arrested you, what you were charged with, what type of crime. And Lincoln suspends this, meaning that in the border states, he wanted to keep control. So if there was any talk, bad about the North or Lincoln or their plans, he just simply had those people arrested and thrown in jail and for the duration of the war without any just cause. Now, whether he could really do that as a president or not, probably not, but he did get away with it, and it kept the border states in line by suspending habeas corpus. So you didn't hear bad news or bad press about the war or the North, and it kept the middle states in line. Again, the North did find their general in Ulysses S. Grant. He is going to be known as the Butcher, though, a nickname that his men gave him, because he had a few flawed battles where many of his men were just slaughtered because of his poor strategy. But because he had so many numbers, so many soldiers, so many reinforcements, he could keep going, and he didn't care how many men that he lost. That was kind of the downside of Ulysses S. Grant. Battle of Antietam. Really quickly, it was called the single bloodiest day. In one